Castlevania is an action animated series released in 2017 by Netflix and Frederator Studios. You remember Netflix, right? The streaming service that, while they sometimes help to produce great shows like Devilman Crybaby, also have a habit of locking their shows up for months before releasing them, long after the audience for them has moved on to the next season. Why is Beastars not coming out until next year? You have it? Just release it outside Japan, damn you! The problem, however, with Castlevania is that it is based off of a video game franchise. And while that's cool and all, I am not as well versed in video games as some people are. I dabble like others might, and I can quarter circle punch like the best of them. But if we actually want to talk about video games and Castlevania specifically in a more knowledgeable manner, then I'm gonna need a little bit of help. Thankfully, I happen to work in a studio with video gaming YouTubers who I can request and or force to help me out. So follow me. No, seriously, follow me. Hi, Shane.
Yeah?
Are you playing Castlevania?
Ghosts and Goblins.
Good enough.
What? Oh, gee.
All right. Here. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Glass Reflection, where today myself and Shane from Re-Res are going to be talking about the Netflix adaptation of Castlevania. Let's check.
Oh, I know this one. Let's Ham.
What? First, however, we should probably cover a bit of history.
Castlevania is a long-running series of video games produced by Konami that originally saw release with the titular Castlevania on the Nintendo Famicom Disk System in 1986. Eventually, it would make its way to the Nintendo NES in North America on May 1st, 1987. Now, when we talk about notable game franchises, Castlevania is among the elite, having continued to this very day with multiple entries spanning several generations of video game consoles.
And pachinko machines.
Thanks, Konami!
While the creators of this show could have pulled any of the stories from the games, they decided to make something that was inspired by the games while not directly repeating the story from any one entry.
This is where Warren Ellis enters into the picture. In 2007, a rumored direct-to-DVD series of 3 animated films based off the third entry of the Castlevania series, Dracula's Curse, was teased to the public, with Warren Ellis as lead writer. But for many years, the project never seemed to get off the ground, at least until 2015, where the project resurfaced, now as an animated miniseries still written by Ellis and then released by Netflix in 2017.
Warren Ellis isn't a household name when it comes to anime, but let me tell ya, in the world of comics, I'd consider him an icon. Ellis has worked on countless comic series and created and co-created multiple characters like Spider Jerusalem from Transmetropolitan, one of my all-time favorite comic series. So when I heard he was on board for Castlevania the animated series, I was quite excited, but also a little worried that he would only get 1 season and then he might actually call it quits.
But quits he did not call it, as Castlevania made it into a second season.
Now, you might be tempted to smash all 12 episodes together and consider it one whole season.
But we would argue you should not do that. These seasons feel distinct and have completely different pacing between each other. So let's take just the first season and look at it a bit closer.
Castlevania Season 1.
Can you seriously make vampires cool again, Mr. Ellis?
Twilight has long since altered the public perception of what vampires are supposed to be.
Sparkly hunks with big eyes and modern fashion sense.
But that's not what we get here. The show opens up in Wallachia in 1455 with a field of impaled dead bodies. The tone is set right from the start.
We are introduced to a young woman passing through the rows of dead. She finds her way to a castle, where she meets Dracula,
who surprisingly doesn't kill her right away.
And the scene ends. Ta-da!
Some years pass and we see that same woman being burnt at the stake.
Turns out that woman and Dracula fell in love. So who do you think might not be happy about her being burnt alive?
Well, I don't know. Maybe this guy?
This sets the story in motion, as now it's all about Dracula getting revenge for the death of his wife Lisa. But with all this backstory, we actually start where all good fantasy role-playing stories begin.
At the tavern with drunks.
Introducing our lead character, Trevor Belmont.
Belmont is a drifter of sorts whose family name seems to not be the most well-liked in the region, a fact of which is made very apparent by the other bar patrons.
Patrons who, because of his name, decide that this would be the perfect time to deliver some butt-kickery and give us just a taste of Trevor's abilities as a fighter, who, while inebriated, still manages to have the upper hand on several grown men.
The show progresses following Trevor visiting another city that Dracula has been laying siege to, engaging this horrible action with his army of the night.
Spooky dooky monsters, big bats and stuff.
In this city, Trevor meets up with a priestess with magical powers and Alucard,
Not that one, or that one, or that one.
who is the son of Dracula.
Get it? It's Dracula spelled backwards. Alucard.
Huh, you know, I didn't actually notice that until just now.
You said you've played Castlevania before.
The three decide to team up with the goal of killing Dracula and ending his evil schemes, and that right there is Season 1.
4 episodes that act as an introduction to our main cast of 3 heroes, who were each playable characters in Castlevania 3.
What about Grant Danasty?
Nobody likes Grant Danasty.
Despite this series being based off of Castlevania 3, as you might imagine, there wasn't much of a story to the old NES game to pull from. So largely, this story seems to be Ellis's interpretation of events with its own spin on the Dracula mythos.
So that starts.
Castlevania Season 2.
Still no Grant Danasty.
Our trio of merry adventurers continue on their quest of trying to kill Dracula.
This season expands from 4 episodes to 8, introducing several other characters and expands the world, backstory, and universe of Castlevania far better than the first entry had.
The story all comes to a head that could almost act as a satisfying conclusion to the series itself.
Yeah, I don't know, it almost sounds like they beat Castlevania 3 or something.
And while some people didn't expect a Season 3, we're apparently getting one, despite the events that have taken place in Season 2 that really, and I mean really, make you question just what the next season could possibly be about.
So what do these first 2 seasons have to offer?
Well, they're violent, they're gory, and boy, did I say they were violent because they are violent, like lots of violence that you might not expect kind of violence.
With vampires, right? They're evil.
But are they really? The show goes on to dive into Dracula and his cohorts, where each and every one have different drives and goals, some even questioning Dracula's end goal of ending humanity.
Characters are introduced like Hector and Isaac, who were pulled straight out of the video games and reflect an aspect of Dracula that is willing to commune with humans that he feels are worthy.
Which is also an aspect he probably showed off in the first season where he, you know, married one.
A point of contention among some of the vampires, by the way.
You might expect each vampire to be viciously evil 24/7 with a mad bloodlust.
We're not saying that isn't there, because it is.
But we also have some fantastic banter and voice acting from a brilliant cast.
I like boats. I'm a fucking Viking. We're supposed to make boats out of things.
And not only is the cast list full of minor celebrities, but we also have a director who is virtually unknown. This serves as his first and only directing credit for a major project as far as we can tell.
Which might explain some of the show's pacing issues, like with how some scenes end awkwardly while others make me question their relevance. The whole narrative really seems to suffer from the fact that the first season was so short. Some parts of the story were stretched, while others were shortened to fit the 2 awkward season lengths.
With that being said, we don't feel any one episode really overstays its welcome, but you do get repetitive points of dialogue re-establishing ideas being brought up several times throughout both seasons.
So the series is not without its faults, but some of the things that it does well, it does very well.
The dialogue alone is a highlight, displaying the characters in a way that some of the early video games never really did.
Speaking of the games, you might be worried, like I was, that you need to have played some of them to grasp the story. That's a fear that I put to rest early on, as the story really does exist on its own, with the show serving as a perfect standalone experience.
But if you're a fan of the video games, there are plenty of references to find, familiar weapons, abilities, locations, and even the use of iconic music from the games. It's all played together well and could even give newcomers to the game series a connecting point straight from the TV show.
An aspect of the show that is very interesting to me is the use and reference of the church as an entity that is almost weaponized. Priests in the series use their holy order as an excuse to dole out horrendous punishment and murders. In fact, the church at moments feels worse than Dracula could ever be, to the point where our trio of heroes and the cast of villains all seem to agree that the church kinda sucks. It's an interesting aspect of the show given the extreme use of religious overtones in a negative light. Typically with movies and shows that deal with vampires, the church is always the good peoples, the right peoples. But in the world of Castlevania the series, they're not good. Not at all.
The original video games were violent for their time. Yeah, I know, it doesn't look exactly like it now, but back in the day, this was pretty violent. But there was a limitation for graphic fidelity given the hardware they were using. The violence in the show seems to accurately kind of get as close to the original video games as they could, but sometimes the series gets way more gory than the games ever really dared venture. Considering that the NES was originally made for kids, and adults that were kids at heart, these original players have grown up since.
Likely, they would appreciate and understand the violence in the show and the religious and political themes as adults. If there was ever a thought that Castlevania is a kids' show, it's simply not. Not even a little bit.
But there is a cute little undead puppy! Oh, look at him, he's missing an eyeball. Now that really does seem like an anime thing. Actually, is this even considered an anime?
Okay, so this series often gets mistaken for a Japanese anime, and I can see why. The character designs look very Japanese-inspired, probably an homage to the franchise's origins. But outside of still frames, the actual animation of the series is very American. How the characters move, interact, and hell, even the lip sync and how they talk has far more in common with Gargoyles or Cyber 6 than it does with Hellsing or Vampire Hunter D. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Different does not equal bad, and while I wouldn't technically call this an anime by any stretch, it's definitely inspired by that style, and the whole production, despite its flaws, really does come off as a labor of love on the side of the producers.
Oh, like that live-action remake of that anime Avatar?
Please don't make me edit that into this video.
But anyway, I think that's what is so impressive about Castlevania. This isn't just a quick slapdash attempt at cashing in on a beloved game franchise.
And when it comes to Konami, they really know how to make cheap cash-ins.
Metal Gear Survive!
And it's f***ing everything, really. it's just everything.
This is a well-written, well-animated, well-performed show that could potentially serve as a blueprint for other video game adaptations in the future.
It does this by following the golden rule of adaptations. Don't just expect people to know that other thing, you idiot! I'm looking at you, Mass Effect! Because it has an anime adaptation. That was actually animated.
Okay. You ever watch Buckaroo Banzai? If you like Castlevania the games, you're in for a treat.
And if you like animated shows, you're in for an experience. And so, with all of that in mind, after meticulously considering our thoughts on the categories of story, characters, animation, sound, and our own personal enjoyment, which we then sit on and ignore entirely for a year until...
What's Princess Mononoke?
It's Princess Mononoke. After all of that, we are awarding Castlevania with the recommendation to watch it, which you can do in the only place that it's available, on Netflix. Of course, if you're looking for a good follow-up in a similar vein, then the two obvious recommendations would be Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust and Hellsing Ultimate. But I'm also going to throw in the additional recommendations of Blood the Last Vampire, as well as Blood Plus, the series that somewhat follows it.
Is this Dragon Ball?
No, that's Angelic Lair. Because nobody talks about the Blood series, and it's a shame because they're actually really freaking good. Lastly, I want to give very special thanks to my patrons who not only support my work in general, but who allow me to do what I do. I love and appreciate you all. Specifically though, as I like to do, I want to give particular shout outs to patrons Ryfen Bonaparte, Rune Jacobson, Calhoun Boy, Richard Emil Bradley, Hector Montemayor, and Siri Yamako for being especially awesome. You guys are great. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, watch more anime and stay frosty. Now get the hell off my set. Okay.
Can vampires have erections?
I don't know how I can use that, but I'd love to.